Ravi walked into the school with his broom in hand, his footsteps quiet against the cold marble floor. He was just a janitor, after all. He didn't belong in the classrooms where bright students sat. He didn't belong in the teacher's lounge where teachers joked and talked about their high-paying jobs. But there was something in Ravi's eyes that no one could ignore. A fire. A fire that had been there for years, burning quietly in his chest, waiting for a chance to ignite. The students looked at him and laughed. "Just a cleaner," they whispered as they walked past. "He's not even good enough to teach." Ravi heard them, but he didn't react. He had learned long ago that silence was his shield. His job was to clean, to fix things, and to stay out of the way. That was all. He would sweep the floors, empty the trash, and go home to his small apartment where he lived alone. But deep inside, Ravi knew there was more to him than this. Much more. That day, the school bell rang, signaling the start of class. Ravi pushed his cleaning cart along the hallway, pausing to wipe down the classroom windows. Inside, he could hear the laughter of the students and the voice of their teacher, Ms. Sharma. But as usual, no one noticed him. To them, he was just the man who cleaned. Then, as Ravi was walking past a group of students in the hallway, one of them, Raj, a popular boy in the school, spilled his juice all over the floor. The rest of the students laughed loudly as Raj pointed at Ravi. "Hey, janitor, clean this mess up. I can't study with this juice everywhere," he shouted. The other students laughed even louder. "Yeah, clean it, cleaner," one of them yelled. Ravi didn't flinch. He bent down slowly and wiped the juice off the floor, using his old rag. As he worked, he noticed the looks on their faces, arrogant, smug, and full of mockery. He could feel their eyes on him, judging him. But Ravi wasn't angry. He had seen worse things in life. He had lived through harder times. As a young boy, he had been the top student in his class, always helping others with their homework. But life had changed when his mother fell ill. He had to drop out of school to work. The scholarship that had been offered to him, gone. The future that had once seemed bright, shattered. Now, years later, he was here, in this school, cleaning, sweeping the floors of the place where he had once dreamed of becoming a great scientist. Later that day, Ravi was called to the principal's office. The principal, Mr. Gupta, was sitting behind his large desk, looking at a stack of papers. His glasses rested low on his nose as he glanced up at Ravi. "Ravi," Mr. Gupta said coldly, "I've been hearing things. The teachers say you've been helping the students in your free time. What's that about?" Ravi didn't answer immediately. He knew this conversation wouldn't end well. He had helped a few students with their science projects during lunch breaks. Nothing big, just small things. He had shared a few tips on how to build simple machines or explain the basic concepts of chemistry. But the teachers didn't appreciate it. They thought it was strange for a janitor to be teaching their students anything. "Do you think you're qualified to teach?" Mr. Gupta asked with a sharp tone. "You're just a janitor. Your place is not in the classroom." Ravi took a deep breath. He didn't want to argue. But something inside him stirred. What if he was more than this? What if he could prove himself? "Mr. Gupta," Ravi said slowly, "I may be a janitor, but I know more than just cleaning. I used to be a student here. I've worked hard in my life. And maybe I have something to offer." The principal raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. "If you think you can just walk into a classroom and teach, you're mistaken. In fact," he said with a smile, "I'll make you a deal. Prove you belong in a classroom. If you can teach a class for just 1 hour without making a fool of yourself, I'll think about keeping you here. But if you fail, you'll be fired." Ravi's heart raced. This was his chance, but it was a challenge he wasn't sure he could win. He had no lesson plans, no textbooks. All he had was a broom and his knowledge from the past. But there was something else too, a fire. "I'll do it," Ravi said, his voice steady. Mr. Gupta smirked. Good luck, Ravi. You'll need it. Ravi walked out of the office, his mind racing. He didn't have a plan. He didn't even know what subject he would teach, but he had something the students and teachers didn't see, a passion. A passion to show them that he was more than just a cleaner. As Ravi stood outside the classroom, waiting for the bell to ring, he looked down at his broom. It wasn't just a tool for cleaning anymore. It was a symbol of what he was about to do. He wasn't just going to teach a class. He was going to prove them wrong. And he was going to do it with the fire in his heart. The bell rang loudly, signaling the start of Ravi's challenge. He stood in front of the classroom, clutching the chalk tightly in his hand. His heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment that would either make him or break him. He looked inside the classroom through the glass window of the door. The students were all sitting in their desks, chatting and laughing. No one seemed to notice him standing there, wearing his janitor uniform, holding a piece of chalk instead of a broom. The janitor teaching. They'd all laugh at him. He knew it. Ravi took a deep breath. You can do this, he whispered to himself. You've been through worse. As the bell rang again, the students quickly settled into their seats. Their laughter quieted down, and the classroom grew still. Ravi stepped inside the room, the door creaking slightly as it opened. The students' eyes immediately locked onto him. They stared for a moment, and then, as if rehearsed, the snickers began. Is this a joke? One girl whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Are we really supposed to listen to this guy? A boy muttered, rolling his eyes. Ravi ignored the whispers. He stood at the front of the classroom, feeling all the eyes on him. He had never taught a class before. He had never even been in a classroom as a teacher. But today, he wasn't going to be the janitor anymore. Today, he was going to show them what he was made of. He wrote the words science, matter and energy on the blackboard. He turned around to face the class, his heart racing. Good morning, students, he said, trying to sound confident. His voice was shaky at first, but he stood up straight. I'm Mr. Ravi, and today, I'll be teaching you about science. The students exchanged confused glances. Some of them snickered, while others just stared at him in disbelief. Mr. Ravi, one boy repeated, trying to hold back a laugh. A janitor teaching science. Ravi cleared his throat. He couldn't let them get to him. This was his chance to prove himself. Yes, he said calmly, a janitor teaching science. Because sometimes the best lessons come from the most unexpected places. The students were still skeptical, but Ravi ignored them. He was determined to show them that he could do this. As Ravi started explaining the basic principles of matter, he noticed something odd. The students weren't making fun of him as much as he thought they would. Some were listening. Some were nodding. He even caught a few students writing notes. Matter is everything around us, he explained. It's the desk you're sitting at, the air you breathe, the water you drink. Matter is made of tiny particles called atoms, and those atoms are always moving. He walked to the board, drew a simple diagram of an atom, and began to explain how atoms bond to form different substances. The class was quiet now. Ravi felt a little more confident. He continued explaining how energy works in the context of matter, how energy can make matter change, like heating water to turn it into steam. He even asked a few simple questions. What happens to water when you heat it? He asked a student in the front row. The boy blinked and said, it turns into steam. Ravi smiled. Correct, he said, and what happens when steam cools down? Another student raised her hand, eager to answer. It turns back into water. Exactly, Ravi said, feeling a rush of pride. You see, science is all around us. It's in the simplest things, like the way water changes form. It's in the way the world works. For the first time, Ravi felt the students weren't just mocking him. They were actually starting to understand. But then, one of the students, a boy named Rowan, raised his hand with a smirk on his face. Ravi knew what was coming. Rowan was one of the popular boys, always making fun of the teachers. He'd been the first to laugh when Ravi entered the room. "Okay, Mr. Ravi," Rowan said. "So if you're such a great teacher, tell us, what happens to water when you freeze it?" The class fell silent. It was a simple question, but Ravi's heart skipped a beat. He had to answer without hesitation. If he messed this up, they would never take him seriously again. Ravi thought for a moment, then smiled confidently. "When you freeze water, it turns into ice." Rowan snorted. "You really think you know science?" he said, rolling his eyes. "That's the most basic thing ever." Ravi nodded. "Yes, it is basic. But that's how science starts. With the basics, the smallest things can lead to the greatest discoveries. And that's something we often forget." The students fell quiet again, some of them thinking about his words. But Ravi wasn't done. Science isn't just about facts. It's about asking questions, experimenting, and learning. He looked at the class, all of them waiting for what he would say next. "You don't need to be a teacher to teach. You just need to understand the world around you and have the courage to share it with others." For a moment, the class sat still, absorbing the message. Then, slowly, a few students began to clap. At first, it was quiet, but then others joined in. Ravi's heart swelled with pride. He wasn't just teaching science. He was teaching them something bigger. He was showing them that everyone has something to offer, no matter who they are. As the bell rang and the students filed out of the classroom, many of them whispered to each other. Ravi didn't know what they were saying, but he didn't care. He had done what he set out to do. He had earned their respect. But as he turned to leave the classroom, he saw something that made him pause. The principal, Mr. Gupta, was standing in the doorway, his arms crossed and his face unreadable. "Well," Mr. Gupta said, "you certainly didn't fail, but we'll see if you can do this again next time, won't we?" Ravi nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll be ready." As Mr. Gupta walked away, Ravi felt a small spark of hope inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The next day at school, something had changed. Ravi walked through the halls with his usual broom and cleaning cart, but this time, some students looked at him differently. They didn't laugh. They didn't whisper. Some even nodded at him. A few smiled. He had taught just one class, but it was enough to shake the school a little. But not everyone was happy about it. In the teacher's lounge, the mood was cold. Ms. Sharma slammed her teacup on the table. "How could the principal let a janitor teach in our school?" she said angrily. Mr. Mehta, the math teacher, nodded. "It's an insult to our profession. He has no degree, no training. Just because he knows a little science doesn't mean he can be a teacher." Another teacher whispered, "And the students actually liked him. That's dangerous. Soon they'll stop respecting us." The teachers weren't afraid of Ravi's knowledge. They were afraid of his connection with the students. They decided they needed to stop him before he became a real threat to their pride. Later that afternoon, as Ravi cleaned the science lab, two teachers walked in, Mr. Mehta and Ms. Sharma. Mr. Mehta crossed his arms. "Ravi," he said firmly, "we've heard what happened yesterday. Impressive. But don't let it go to your head." Ravi looked up from the sink he was cleaning. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," he said quietly. "I just wanted to help." Ms. Sharma stepped forward. "Help, or take over our jobs," she snapped. "You're not a teacher. You never will be." Ravi stayed calm. He had faced worse things in life than angry teachers. But then Mr. Mehta added something that hurt. "You should remember your place. You belong with that broom, not in front of a blackboard." Ravi's hand tightened around the cloth he was holding. The words hit hard, but he didn't show it. "Maybe," he said softly, "but what if someone's place isn't where people expect it to be?" The two teachers scoffed and left the room. Ravi stood still. His heart was heavy. Their words reminded him of every time in life someone had told him he wasn't enough, that he wasn't meant to dream. But then he thought of the students. He thought of how they had clapped. He thought of how their eyes lit up when he explained something clearly. That was real. That meant something. Later that evening, Ravi was mopping the main hallway when he saw a group of students crowded around a bulletin board. He walked closer, curious. A new notice had been posted. Inter-school science competition. Teams must be guided by a teacher. The students looked disappointed. Rohan, the boy who had teased Ravi before, sighed. I wanted to enter this year, but our science teacher already picked his team. No chance for the rest of us. Ravi leaned his broom against the wall. Why don't you form your own team? He asked gently. Rohan looked at him. Only teachers can guide us. It says so. Ravi smiled. Maybe you just need someone who believes in you. Let me help. I'll guide your team. Rohan raised an eyebrow. But you're not a teacher. I'm not, Ravi admitted. But I know science, and I believe in you. There was silence. Then another student, Priya, stepped forward. Let's do it. Let's give him a chance. More students joined in. Yeah, why not? The other teachers never pick us anyway. They didn't care that Ravi wore a janitor's uniform. They cared that he believed in them. And just like that, Ravi had a team. The next few days were full of hard work. After school, Ravi and his small team of students met in the old storeroom because no one would let them use a real classroom. They built models, tested ideas, and learned about science in the simplest ways. Ravi explained everything using real-life examples, how a fan works, why ice melts, how electricity flows. The students were learning faster than ever before, and they were enjoying it. But not everyone was happy. Mr. Gupta, the principal, found out about Ravi's science team. He wasn't pleased. He called Ravi into his office. You're forming teams now, Mr. Gupta asked coldly. You're a janitor, not a teacher. You don't have permission for this. I didn't think I needed permission to help students learn, Ravi replied, calmly. Mr. Gupta frowned. You're walking a thin line, Ravi. One mistake, and you're out. Ravi nodded. I understand. But he didn't stop. Because he knew what was coming. The science competition. And this was his chance, not just to prove he could teach, but to show everyone that anyone can rise, no matter how far they've fallen. They tried to break him with words, with doubt, with pride. But Ravi? He wasn't done yet. The school's old storage room was dusty, dark, and filled with broken chairs and boxes no one had touched in years. But to Ravi, it was more than just a room. It was hope. It was the only space they had. No real classroom. No fancy boards. No projector. Just old tables, used notebooks, and young minds full of questions. Ravi looked around and smiled. Let's clean this place up, he said to the students gathered around him. There were 5 of them. Rohan, Priya, Aman, Fatima, and little Kabir from class 7. All of them had one thing in common. They were always left behind when it came to school competitions. No one believed in them. Until now. They picked up brooms and dustpans. The same tools Ravi used every day now had a new purpose. Together, they turned the dirty storage room into a learning space. Fatima wiped the windows. It's still not a real classroom, she said. Ravi smiled gently. A real classroom is where real learning happens, he replied. And that can be anywhere, even here. For the next few days, something magical started to happen. After the final school bell rang, while other students went home or to their coaching classes, Ravi's team gathered in the storeroom. Every day, he came with new lessons, simple ones, taught in a way that made science fun. He used plastic bottles to explain air pressure, balloons to show energy. He took an old torch apart to teach about circuits. One evening, Priya brought in an old broken fan. Can we use this? She asked. Ravi's eyes lit up. Yes, he said. Let's fix it. And while we do, I'll teach you how electric current flows. The students listened carefully as he showed them how wires work, how switches control electricity, and how energy moves. They were not just building models, they were building confidence. Each student began to shine in their own way. Rowan, who was once known only for his jokes, was now focused and serious. He was great at building things. Fatima, who barely spoke in class before, now asked questions about every topic. Little Kabir, the youngest of the group, had a sharp brain. He remembered everything Ravi taught. Every day, their project grew stronger. They had chosen a topic for the science competition: how renewable energy can power villages. They wanted to build a working model of a windmill using recycled materials, but not everyone was cheering for them. One afternoon, while they were working, Mr. Mehta walked by the storeroom. He peeked inside and saw the children with Ravi building a small windmill using plastic bottles and cardboard. He shook his head. "Foolishness," he muttered. "A janitor teaching science with trash. Let's see how far that gets them." Word spread around the school. Other students laughed. "Ravi's team is building a fan out of garbage. They're working in the storeroom because no one wants them. They think they can win. That's cute." The laughter grew louder. Even some teachers smirked when they passed Ravi in the hallway. But Ravi didn't stop, because something was changing. These students, once ignored, now came early to school and stayed late. They smiled more. They believed more. And one day, something happened that proved just how far they had come. The big day had arrived. The inter-school science competition was being held in the city's largest school auditorium. Dozens of schools had come with their best students. Every project looked professional: solar systems, robots, water purifiers, smart apps, and more. Ravi and his team walked in, holding their model carefully. It was made with plastic bottles, cardboard, sticks, and an old fan motor. Other students looked at them and whispered, "That's their project. Are they serious? Wait, isn't that guy the janitor?" Ravi's team tried to ignore it, but it hurt. Fatima held her folder tightly. "They're laughing at us," she said softly. Ravi bent down and spoke gently. "Let them laugh. You'll see how quiet they get when your windmill starts to speak." Rowan smiled weakly. "If it works." Ravi looked into his eyes. "It will. You've worked hard. Trust your work." Soon, the judges started going from table to table. Each team got only 5 minutes to present. The teams before them spoke with confidence. Some wore matching school jackets. Their presentations were full of big words and technical terms. Then, it was Ravi's team's turn. They stood behind their simple setup. The windmill stood in the center. Next to it was a small fan, a battery, and a tiny bulb. The judges walked over. One of them looked confused. "Which teacher guided you?" he asked. The students looked at Ravi. Rowan answered, "Sir, our guide is Mr. Ravi." The judge checked his list. "There's no teacher registered with that name." Ravi stepped forward. "I'm not a school teacher," he said. "I'm the janitor." There was silence. The crowd behind them chuckled. One judge raised his eyebrows. "A janitor." Another whispered, "Is this a joke?" But before anyone could laugh again, Priya spoke clearly. "Sir, may we begin our demonstration?" The judge nodded slowly. Rowan turned on the small fan. The wind hit the blades of the windmill. It started spinning. Kabir connected the wires to the bulb. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the bulb lit up, bright, clear, steady. The laughter in the room stopped. The judges leaned in. Fatima began. "Our project shows how even small wind power can generate electricity in villages where there is no light. We used recycled materials to show that it doesn't cost much to bring change." Another student added, "It's simple, cheap, and it works." The judges asked a few questions. The students answered all of them with confidence. Then one judge turned to Ravi. "Where did you learn to teach science?" Ravi smiled. "I didn't learn in a school. I learned in life. I read books. I watched. I tried. I failed, and I kept learning. After they finished, the students packed their model and walked to the sitting area. They were quiet. Ravi looked at them. You did great, he said. But will we win? Kabir asked. Ravi didn't answer right away. Winning is good, he said, but today you did something better. You made people listen. That's more powerful than a trophy. Still, in their hearts, they hoped. They had given their best. Now all they could do was wait. Hours passed. The auditorium filled with noise again as the final results were being prepared. Then the lights dimmed. The head judge walked to the microphone. We saw many brilliant projects today, he said. Some were advanced, some were high-tech, and some reminded us why science must also be simple and meaningful. The crowd listened. Our second prize goes to Green Valley School for their solar-powered water filter. Applause. And now, the judge said, our first prize goes to a team that reminded us what science is really about. Creativity, problem-solving, and using what you have to make a difference. Ravi's team leaned forward. The winners are Dream Valley Public School, guided by Mr. Ravi. For a moment, no one moved. Then Priya gasped. Rohan shouted, that's us. The students jumped from their seats. The crowd was stunned. The same crowd that laughed at them was now clapping. Some teachers stood up. The judges smiled. As Ravi walked with his team to the stage, the same man who had once been ignored now stood under the spotlight. The janitor had guided his team to victory. They had done it. One morning, he walked into the school assembly with a serious face. The whole school was gathered. He raised a paper and said, I have an announcement. There was silence. He continued, from next week, Mr. Ravi will no longer work in this school. Gasps. The students froze. The teachers looked around in shock. He broke school rules. He acted without permission. His actions, while emotional, cannot be accepted in a system of order. The silence turned into murmurs. And then, Kabir raised his hand. Sir, he said, his voice trembling, if Ravi sir leaves, we all lose something. Mr. Gupta frowned. Then Priya stepped forward. He made us believe in ourselves. Then Rohan. He made this school better. One by one, the students started stepping out of line. They stood together. Even some teachers began to clap slowly. The janitor, the man who had been seen as invisible, was now being defended by the whole school. Mr. Gupta looked around. His control was slipping. And then, a voice came from behind him. It was the school board chairman. I've seen enough, he said calmly. Call Mr. Ravi to my office. Ravi stood quietly outside the chairman's office. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from uncertainty. The entire school now knew the truth. He had broken rules, yes, but he had also broken limits, broken silence, and broken the chains that kept so many children from believing in themselves. But was that enough to save his job? The office door opened. Please come in, said the secretary. Ravi stepped inside. The school board chairman, Mr. Khurana, sat at a large desk. His face was unreadable. Ravi stood straight. Mr. Khurana looked at him carefully, then asked, Do you know why you're here, Mr. Ravi? Ravi nodded. Because I did something I wasn't supposed to do. The chairman leaned back. You taught without permission. You gathered students. You used the storeroom. And you won a science competition that brought attention to our school across the city. Ravi lowered his eyes. I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir. I only wanted to help those children. No one else was listening to them. The chairman stayed silent for a few moments. Then he asked, Do you regret it? Ravi thought deeply. He shook his head. No, I regret nothing. Mr. Khurana stood up and walked toward the window. You know, he said slowly, I started my career as a school teacher. Back in my village, we had no electricity. I used to teach students under a tree. He turned back to face Ravi. You remind me of that time. Ravi looked up in surprise. Mr. Khurana continued, you broke rules, yes, but not for personal gain. You broke them because the system failed those kids, and you refused to let them stay broken. He paused, then asked, do you want to continue helping students? Ravi blinked. More than anything, sir. Then I have a proposal. Ravi leaned in. The next day, the whole school was called for an urgent morning assembly. This time, it wasn't Mr. Gupta who stood on the stage. It was Mr. Khurana. He looked out at the sea of students and teachers and began. Sometimes, schools become too focused on order, rules, and tradition. We forget what matters most: learning, growth, and heart. He continued, one man, who was never trained as a teacher, reminded us what true education looks like. There were murmurs in the crowd. The chairman turned to Ravi, who stood quietly on the side of the stage. He waved him forward. Mr. Ravi, he said, you are no longer the janitor of this school. Gasps echoed across the assembly. Mr. Gupta's eyes widened. You are now officially our student innovation mentor. You will guide students in creativity, science, and real-world problem-solving. The children erupted in cheers. The teachers clapped. Even Mr. Mehta had tears in his eyes. Ravi stood frozen. Then slowly he stepped forward and took the mic. He looked out at the students and said, I don't have fancy degrees. I don't wear a tie. But I believe in learning, and I believe every child deserves to feel that someone believes in them. He paused. I'm not just here to teach. I'm here to learn with you. Later that day, the old janitor's room was turned into a student discovery lab. It had old tools, wires, cardboard, and books. Nothing fancy, but it was full of energy, dreams, and possibilities. Ravi walked in, holding his same old broom. Kabir asked, Sir, why the broom? You're not a janitor anymore. Ravi smiled and leaned the broom against the wall. Because I'll never forget where I started. Weeks passed. Under Ravi's guidance, students who once failed their classes started building, creating, and solving problems. The school gained attention from education programs across the country. Reporters came. Visitors came. But most importantly, hope returned. Mr. Gupta, once filled with pride and ego, slowly began to change too. One afternoon, he walked into the discovery lab. Ravi looked up, surprised. I just came to observe, Mr. Gupta said quietly. Ravi nodded and smiled. You're welcome anytime, sir. Mr. Gupta looked at the students working and said, almost to himself, maybe I needed to learn too. On the school wall, a new quote was painted for all to see. Great teachers don't always stand at the front of the class. Sometimes they start by sweeping the floor. And under it was a picture of Ravi, holding both a broom and a trophy. The man who was once invisible was now unforgettable.